Well, Zach, I'm really excited about this topic today where we are going to dive deep on pricing, pricing structure, pricing recommendations. There is so much for us to dig into here. I'm excited to get into it.
I'm looking at the agenda, Gabe, and a lot of this you made, but I feel like I'm in accounting again. I feel like I'm studying for an exam with all of these terms we're going to be talking about today.
I know it's going to be a lot of math discussion today for sure, but I promise we'll make it fun. It will be a fun discussion. Speaking of fun discussion, Zach, one of the reasons we wanted to, well, there are kind of two reasons why we wanted to have this discussion. Pricing is just really important overall in your business, and we'll talk about why here in just a moment. But I've been reading this book, and I've got it sitting over here on my desk right here, called The Handbook on the Psychology of Pricing. And I got it last weekend, and I could not put it down. I was just like feverishly reading through it all and taking notes on my phone with all kinds of different really interesting takeaways. And we're going to talk about a lot of those today. And then also last weekend, I had to make a purchase from Amazon because every Sunday morning I make pancakes for my kids. Okay. And I have a specific ladle that I like to use to ladle out the pancakes onto the griddle. All right. And unfortunately, that ladle got caught in the drawer and it broke, just snapped in two. So I needed a new ladle. And so I went on to Amazon to buy said new ladle. And I noticed a lot of the pricing psychology. I don't want to call them tips and tricks because that sounds sleazy, but for lack of a better term, tips and tricks that we're going to talk about today in that Amazon purchase. The original price of the ladle was $9.99. They had slashed that price out and put $8.59. But then in big red letters, right, or big red numbers, I should say, right next to it, it said 14% discount. And I thought that was a really interesting way to frame it up. And Amazon, we've talked about this before, Zach, but Amazon is so genius when it comes to pricing structure, pricing methodology.
I've got three examples. It's actually two, but I just added a third because I need to distract the audience. But number one, don't you have like a backup ladle in your house, or is that not a thing? I think I have two, but
I don't actually. I had to use a spoon like an idiot, and my pancakes were all misshapen. My kids were actually honestly kind of annoyed that they weren't round circles. So it was a rough Sunday at the Peterson house.
This goes into my number two item here. Is I don't have like a specific ladle I use for pancakes. So, like I usually just like mix and like try to dump over like the griddle, which always makes a huge mess. Why not? But the third item there, you talked about Amazon, and I just bought something from Amazon in the past week, and similar to your example, we might have to talk about this more on our next pricing episode. But when I was checking out, I don't have Prime. I use Amazon once every 6 months or so. It's not very often, so I don't have Prime. But I was checking out, and it gave me the, hey, you could do a $1 Prime trial, and it would reduce your price from this plus shipping to this. And I thought, well, why would I not? So now I have Prime for the next month or so, however long that trial lasts, maybe a week. But it was very similar, Gabe. It's giving me that original price and saying, hey, sign up for Prime membership in this case, and your price is going to decrease by I think it was, pretty significant amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, well, why not? I'm not buying anything too expensive. The trial is $1. And whether I remember to cancel or not is now on me.
Well, and we've talked about this before too, but when you go to cancel, Amazon's really smart about leaning into loss aversion and what people hate loss aversion. And that's a topic we're gonna discuss later on too. But what they'll do is they'll tell you, here's how much money you saved by having Prime over the last year, right? Here's how much you saved in shipping. Here's all of the things that you're going to lose. Here's all of the content that you've consumed on Amazon Prime Video. Like, they really turn up the contrast around all of the things you're going to lose when you cancel that membership. And they're absolutely geniuses with it. It's a reason they're in Behemoth.
I mean, you have to jump through 5 pages. Are you sure? Do you want to cancel now and lose your benefits? They're very good. They know exactly what they're doing. So
yes, they do. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's kind of get into the meat of this today, Zach. So what we wanted to talk about today was really, how do you ensure that you're getting your pricing right? And I mentioned the book. I would highly recommend the book. I think it's like $14.99 on Amazon or something. It's very inexpensive. So if you're in marketing, if you're ever talking about pricing structure, trying to understand, where people are at from a psychological perspective when they're actually making purchasing decisions, I would definitely recommend that book. It's a really good read. And, it's got tons and tons of studies basically that support all of the research that's been done in the book. So definitely recommend that. But when we think about why is pricing so important, it's the largest profit driver in your business. And we'll talk through this just a little bit more here in a sec. But, Zach, as you think about, of the different dials that you could turn in the business, did it surprise you that pricing was the biggest profit driver? Because it kind of surprised me a little bit as I started thinking about it.
I don't know if I would say I'm surprised, but I'm also not going to say I'd expect that to be number one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and when we talk about different drivers in the business, the way I think there's a very simple way to break this down. And Zach, this is where it sort of gets into our accounting discussion here, right? But, if you think about 4 major buckets that can impact your overall profitability as a business, you've got unit sales or volume. How many things are you actually selling, whether those be products or services? Variable costs, fixed costs, and then your price, right? And each one of those things is really, small percentage changes in each one of those can have a positive impact in your business, but price is the biggest percentage increase. A small increase there has a really material impact in your profit. I want to walk through each one of those percentages, but before I do that, any additional details you'd add there, Zach?
No, I'm excited to walk through this. Like I said, I feel like I'm right back in managerial accounting. I can already, I'm visualizing my variable costs and my fixed cost charts, and I'm trying not to open Excel if I'm being honest. So I have to.
I did actually think about creating a little table for this, and I still might do that because I feel like having a structure for having this conversation would actually be really helpful. So I'm probably going to do that because I just can't help myself and I'm super nerdy about this
I won't
stuff.
stop you, but Gabe, let's talk about unit sales, so the volume a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk through that one. So with unit sales, and I'm gonna factor all of these around a 1% change. So a 1% increase in your volume delivers a 4% increase in profit. So that's a pretty decent number, right? Where, again, if I increase from 100 units to 101 units, I'm going to increase my profit by 4%, all other things being equal. From a variable cost perspective, if I decrease my variable cost, so in my ladle example, if it costs them $4 to make that ladle, probably more like 4 cents if we're being realistic, but if it costs $4 to make that ladle and they decrease that variable cost by 1%, they can see a 7% increase in profit. So even larger increase in profit there than what they would be able to drive if they saw a 1% increase in volume sales. On the fixed cost side, so those would be things like employees, your rent, if you're a brick and mortar store, those types of things. Those fixed costs, a 1% decrease there only drives a 3% increase in profit. So that's kind of the smallest impact that you can have. So managing your fixed costs is important, but small changes there actually don't have that big of an impact on profit. Now, from a price perspective, a 1% increase in price drives an 11% increase in profit. By far the biggest percentage increase that you can drive versus any of those other variables that we talked about. And that's why it's so important to get your pricing right.
I think that's very well said, Gabe. Getting the pricing right. Again, I don't want to repeat too much of what you just said going through those, but I didn't realize that 1% increase in price would translate to the 11% increase in profit as well. So I'm glad you were able to break that down.
Well, it logically makes sense because if all your costs are staying the same and you have this nominal increase in price, and Zach, we see this in the business that we work in all the time. We work in we work with broadband service providers who primarily have very heavily fixed cost businesses. It's tremendously expensive to build networks. And those would be classic fixed costs, right? but the variable costs are a lot smaller than that. So that's a business where, again, that those price changes, increasing price by a very small percentage, can be wildly impactful, especially if you have a very heavily fixed cost focused business.
I agree, Gabe. I think a lot of the conversations we have, especially when I'm doing financial modeling, almost every single cost, when you break it down by line item, is a fixed cost. So I think that's a very great way to put that as well.
Speaking of costs, can you talk about the Sankey chart? I know this is a little bit of a digression, but you shared something with me, Zach, this week that I just thought was the coolest thing ever. This beautiful, beautiful Sankey chart that took revenue through cost over to gross profit in a very, very visually cool way.
Yeah, let's talk about this visual. And I'm all about visualizing data. The reason being, Gabe and I love to geek out on spreadsheets, but not everyone does. So being able to visualize that data and be like, these are your expenses, this is your gross profit, any income streams as well for the revenue side, and being able to visualize that in a simple manner has been, I think key to a lot of the conversations I have with customers. Before I talk about the graph, though, Gabe, you know what kind of ads I've been seeing on Instagram this week?
Oh, I'm dying to know what kind of ads you've been seeing after doing this.
These. I'll see them again, but I've been getting, so I was Googling like the best tools to make these, right? Can I do it in Excel? Is there a plugin? How do I protect data while making these? All of these things. But now I'm getting ads specifically on Instagram from different platforms that can make these charts. And I thought it was fantastic
hilarious.
Because the reason I made this, I saw one for Visa, and it was looking at all of the revenue Visa takes and then their expenses and, at the end of the day, what profit do they actually have? What's their gross profit? So I took that, and for Gabe and I working in broadband, I thought, okay, well, how do we simplify these financial models we build into a visual? And what I did is I took in that that broadband, right? So maybe you pay $55 for 1 gig of service. There's one income. Then also maybe you have some managed services on top of that, managed Wi-Fi. I know some people do different like virus intrusion, protection, things like that. If there's any added cost, adding that in as well. And then from there, with this chart, we can actually like show this income, this revenue, and then start to subtract out the expenses. And of course, it's color coded, so you can follow what's an expense.
Of course.
What's the gross profit at the end of the day. But it's showing you, not only where your money's going, you're paying for this, you have depreciation on this equipment at the end of the day, but it's also showing, the volume, how much is going there. And it helps visualize how insignificant maybe some expenses are. Not to say any expense is insignificant, but it's helping you visualize where exactly this money is going and how at the end of the day you end up with whatever your gross profit may be. So I'm big into data visualization tools. And I think this one has been just super helpful, taking that, Excel spreadsheet that's just chaos. I know we all have one of these spreadsheets, and showing you simply what your revenue is, what your gross profit is, and any expenses you have in there as well. And Gabe, this is, again, we talked about fixed cost. Most of those costs in there, if not all. I'm trying to think of the last one I did here, but fixed cost.
Yeah, it's mostly fixed costs in this business for sure. Well, and what I love the visual, and we'll figure out a way to throw a link into the show notes or something like that on Spotify. So if anybody wants to go check out the tool that we use for the visualization, or say Zach used for the visualization, go check that out. It's actually a really cool tool. But having that visual really helped us understand basically that discussion that I just went through of what percentage changes can I drive in my business and see an increase in profit. If I'm looking at a cost that's $1 and my ARPU is $55 or $60, well, even if I completely eliminate that cost, it's not going to drive that much of a change in profit. Whereas, oh my gosh, fixed costs represent 50% of the profit that I'm driving in my business, or the cost that I'm driving in my business. Any small percentage change I can impact there is going to have a much larger impact, versus some of these smaller variable costs, I should say.
And I'm thinking about these charts we've been playing with, Gabe, and I keep going back to that 1% price increase, 11% increase in profit. So like I mentioned, these charts are weighted. So if you were to come in and hypothetically increase your profit or increase your price, excuse me, by 1%, I mean you could see that almost immediately. So I really want to play with this a little bit. Take some of these items, whether it's the variable cost, the fixed cost we talked about, changing the price a little bit, and again just see what that impact is. And I built the chart on a per subscriber basis. So again, I wanted to see per each subscriber on this specific offering. What's the impact, what's the outcome. But you can also do it, your business overall. I mentioned that Visa example, that was the business overall, but I think it's a fantastic way to visualize, in this case, the financial models we work with.
I agree. I think it's a really cool one. We'll definitely share that out just so people can start to play with it. I think it'd be a really interesting one to dig into. So shifting gears a little bit here, Zach, okay, so if we agree that pricing is the most impactful thing that you can do for your business, it's these small percentage changes here can drive really significant changes from a profit perspective. Well, we want to talk through some really kind of tactical things that you can do from a pricing perspective. Zach mentioned kind of episode 1 of 2. I think we're going to break this up into a couple of episodes because there's a lot to discuss here. We have a lot to discuss just in this episode, and then there's a whole bunch of other things like decoy pricing, like anchoring, that we aren't even going to discuss in this episode. So stay tuned for episode 2. We'll figure out when we're going to drop that one, but definitely, there's so much to discuss here from a pricing perspective. So just the first thing I want to hit on here, Zach, is choice. And this is a conversation that you and I have a lot on a regular basis. And one of the things that we see often is people offering too many choices for the services or products that they're selling. And I have a buddy who I work with, his name's Jordan. He has a great quote that I steal from him that says, people don't want more choices. They want to feel more confident in the choices that they make. And I love that perspective. And I think it's so relevant for most of what we see in the world on a day-to-day basis is too much choice and people getting confused because of all of the choices.
Gabe, I think this is something everyone can resonate, whether you're the marketer on the call or you're the consumer on Amazon. And Gabe, going back to your ladle example, I feel like you're the kind of person that kind of went in knowing exactly which ladle to buy. But when you go to Amazon, this happened to me this week. I found myself on page 2, page 3, and I'm always one of those people that's like, if I can't find it on page 1, then I'm not going to look. But I was 3 pages deep on Amazon. Looking at a product, and I had all of these choices for what ultimately was the same product. It's overwhelming. And whether it's on Amazon or if you're buying services online, I think of like cell phones and even Apple too. When you go to Apple's website, they typically do an okay job at this. I have thrown a lot of shade at them lately for their MacBook line. You got the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro. The iPhone, I don't know what they have now, or like the XDR, the XR, what they have, all these different naming schemes they're going with. And there does become a point where you have an overwhelming number of choices, and consumers don't know the difference. They don't understand what the difference is. In the Apple case, what's different between a MacBook Air and a MacBook? We get into those situations, and the iPad line as well. I could criticize Apple all day for how they name and come up with new products. But I think to your original point here, simplifying that choice so you don't have too many.
Yep, absolutely. And what happens when you don't simplify the choice is people aren't going to buy. They're not going to convert. And in the study that was discussed in the book, this was a study where they looked at people selling jam in a grocery store. And so you've got the little kiosk, the little table set up, and you've got all your jams out, and people can come by and sample. And so they did 2 different experiments, and they looked at a situation where they had 24 jams set up in a grocery store. And a lot of people came by. A lot of people were excited to, try all the different flavors. Only 3% of people ended up purchasing a jam in that scenario. When they did the exact same study, but reduced the number from 24 down to 6, not as many people came up, but what they did get was a 30% conversion rate for people walking up to the table. That is a massive difference in conversion rate by just taking a huge number and reducing it to a much smaller number and making it so people had more confidence in the choice that they were making.
It's funny you bring this up. I keep seeing this on TikTok, but it's a family shop, and they make beverages. And what they've been doing is they've been going to like the Costco's, or I don't know what stores they go to, the warehouses, where you've got a whole aisle behind you, and people come up and he says, hey, I've got, drink A, drink B. Why don't you try it? And it's a blind taste test. Why don't you try it and let me know which one you like? And I would say 95% of the time they pick the one he and his dad had made. And almost every TikTok, the person that drinks it goes and buys it, right? There's the occasional time where like they pick the competitor brand or like the well-known brand, and it's great. They're very good about it. But in that small, here's two options with an aisle behind you of basically the same thing, and they almost always pick the one.
Mm-hmm. Well, that gets to another wonderful psychological tactic, which is reciprocity, right? And there's a whole other discussion we could have about one of my other favorite books, a book called Influence, where they talk a lot about reciprocity, and that's a perfect example of you give a little to get, right? And so in this example, they're just giving that little bit of a, hey, taste this, see if you like it. And then people feel somewhat obligated once they do find out that that's the product that they tasted and liked to go buy it. So that's another wonderful psychological tactic that people can use to increase sales by using reciprocity as a way to drive that.
I just love the psychology of pricing. And Gabe, I meant to tell you, I haven't read this book. I did look on Audible, but my Audible account had expired, so I might have to buy the book. But it kind of goes into our next topic here of 99 cents to 95 cents. And when I think of this, I feel like I have my own opinion, Gabe, but I want to hear from you and see what you think on this one.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because all of us have seen this a gazillion times, right? The $2.99, the $99.99, or the $99.95, whatever, right? So it's 4 cents. Does it really make a difference in whether your price ends in 95 cents versus 99 cents? And again, they went off and did all these studies, and it actually does make a difference what your price ends in, whether it's 99 cents or 95 cents. But it depends on the type of product that you're trying to sell. So for low priced products, it's better to use 99 cents. But for higher priced products, they should end in 95 cents. So basically the high versus low cut here is anything over $50 should end in 95 cents. So if you're selling a product over $50, you will sell more of them if you end in 95 cents versus 99 cents. So 55.95, 65.95, whatever it may be, versus 65.99. So there's something psychological in the way that people approach this where, again, if it's a lower price product, a $2.99, a $1.99, whatever, you should end it in 99. But for prices that are a little bit above that, they should end in 95.
It's funny because I've never actually looked at that. I was just pulling up some receipts and what I bought the past week, like Lululemon, to see what the cost was, and they ended on a round number, so that one doesn't count to begin with.
Well, we'll talk about that one next.
Yeah, Apple's one I think I buy from more often, and I think for the most part the 99 cent. But it's interesting to think about people's buying decisions. Again, like you mentioned, we're talking a nickel here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's not a big difference, but for whatever reason, there's just a psychological component of, if it's in the 99, it feels cheap. And so people are more likely to purchase it, if it's those smaller dollar items. The other piece of this is thinking about whether you have an emotion-based product or a utilitarian product. So if it's an emotion-based product, that would be, fashion or, jewelry, those sorts of things, right? Those are more emotion-based products. It's really important to end those in round numbers versus utilitarian products need to end in odd numbers. So again, the 99 versus zeros. Yeah, there you go. You just said it.
You mentioned clothing. That's what I just used as my example, and the number was 128.00. No pennies, no nickels on that one.
Yep, absolutely. And you see that a lot with, fashion products and things like that. Like if you go out and buy it, not that I would ever do this, but buy a $4,000 handbag, it's not going to be $3,999. It's going to be $4,000 right on the button, right?
I really want to see you with this handbag now.
It would probably be a gift for my wife, but my wife would murder me if I ever spent $4,000 on a handbag. She does not like spending money on what she would consider silly things like that. So I would be sleeping. So this is a brief diversion, but I was going to say I'd be sleeping on the front lawn. And this week, I've told you that we got a new mattress, right? So we talked about the new mattress purchase that I made previously. Well, the old mattress has been sitting in my garage for the last 2 months because I've been trying to figure out how to get rid of this stupid thing. And finally this week, we had a guy come over to do some tree work, and he's like, "Oh, you should just put that on Facebook Marketplace. Somebody will come pick it up for free." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, cool." So did that. And we then threw the mattress out, put the box springs and the mattress out in our driveway because somebody was going to come by and pick it up. And I just wanted to have it out there so they could, pull up and pick it up. But I'm like, my buddy next door texts me and says, "Man, what did you do to make your wife mad? Like, did she really making you sleep on the front lawn?" So if I bought the $4,000 handbag, you would see me sleeping on the front lawn in the mattress in my driveway.
And it's funny you bring up Facebook Marketplace, and we're talking about price, and so I'll say this as well, but every time I want to get rid of something, it depends what I'm getting rid of. I used to just list things on eBay, someone would buy them, ship them off. It was oftentimes a lot of used tech, used camera equipment, things like that. Mm-hmm. But my neighbor, he's always telling me, he's like, if you post that on Facebook Marketplace, it'll be gone in 10 minutes. So finally, I started doing this, when I was cleaning out my house and things like that, I would post things on Facebook Marketplace, and someone would message me within, not even joking, 5 minutes. We timed it once to see how long it would take, and you get the message, "Is this available?" And I'm like, "Yes." And then it's like, "Oh, can you hold it?" "No, you come get it now because it's gone." It's funny to me, and I don't post on Facebook, maybe a picture or so a year. I don't use Facebook, but Marketplace has been fantastic. I put a grill on Marketplace once, and it was gone probably within a half an hour. It's a fantastic way to get rid of things. I don't care what you think about Facebook, but Gabe,
Facebook Marketplace experience. Oh my gosh, I was impressed.
From it.
No, I definitely don't want to buy from it, but getting rid of stuff, I hate clutter. It drives me insane. I just want to get rid of things. I want simplicity in my life. So I was so happy to get rid of it. And I was happy I got rid of it. It saved me money because otherwise I was going to have to figure out a way to take it to the dump and pay $100 to have it recycled. So the person basically saved me $100 by just coming and picking it up out of my front yard. But there was a day this week that Gabe's house looked super classy with the mattress and box spring sitting out in front of his driveway. Nothing but class here at the Peterson house.
This is a total side note now, but we're going down this rabbit hole. A few weeks ago, one of my friends in town, they tried to prank me. They put some things on my porch, some Halloween decorations, and it's June. I don't, and one of my sisters, she texted me. She's like, "Hey, there's a nightstand and some stuff here, next to the dumpster at my college apartment." And I thought, okay, we'll take that. So I took that, and I went and stuck it on my friend's patio. We put flowers around it, totally dressed it up. But Gabe, you would have awesome. Fit right in, We'll get these things from Facebook Marketplace and put some life back in them.
That's awesome. I love it, even for pranking purposes. Well, okay, let's. I'll rein it back in here to our actual conversation. So again, just to top up that conversation of the 99 versus 95. Again, if you're below $50, 99 cents is definitely the way to go. You need to end your prices in that. If it's above $50, probably want to be in 95. Well, I think this is a good maybe follow-up topic for a future episode, but the $100 price point I think is a really important one, and also as it relates to discounting. So we'll talk about that because one of the other big topics we're going to discuss on the next episode is discounting and best practices around discounting. I mentioned the Amazon example previously with the ladle. What they did was the regular price was $9.99. The sale price was $8.59. Well, $1.40 off is not that exciting, but what they did is they put in big red numbers, 14% discount. And that, because it was one in red and two large letters, or large numbers, I should say, and that number, the 14%, is actually bigger than the dollar. That made it feel like it was a larger discount than I was actually getting. So there's a lot to be said there around how you discount and how you display those discounts to your customers or potential customers.
Great example of this is, so yeah, we've talked about this on the podcast, but in the past 12 months, a new broadband provider came into my town and is rebuilding, overbuilding with fiber. So the national, legacy provider, unnamed provider, is having a tough time because they can't compete with this new fiber provider. And one of the things I keep getting, of course, I switched to fiber as soon as it was available. But one of the things I keep getting in the mail are these big postcards, and it's got like the old price, like $59.99, and then the new price, which right now is $39 for like 500 megabits per second. And a couple things they've done there. One is, again, they've crossed it out. Again, the font is big and everything. But it makes me go back to, they keep saying $39.99 versus, the 40 whatever dollars. And from a psychology component, it sounds like a $39.99 is a huge discount from like the $40. But I mean, again, we're talking like a penny here in some of these cases, or, in this case, it's more than that a little bit because they're really trying to get people back on their legacy network. But as we talk about, where do you put the decimal, the 95 cents, the 99 cents, it's just always interested me to, think about how little of a change has such a big impact.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of leads us nicely into this last topic, Zach, which is what percentage changes are noticeable by people. And this gets to loss aversion. So that kind of topic we were talking about earlier of people hate to lose more than they like to win. So there was a study that was done, and basically the dollars associated with this is just to make them kind of nice round numbers. Again, humans hate loss. So losing $10 feels about as good as winning $25 feels good. So it's a weird dynamic where, again, losing that $10 feels bad, but it feels good to win 25, but basically that 25 and 10 are effectively offset, right? And it's a weird dynamic where, even though you're winning, you have to win more in order to feel like that loss was not quite as bad. And this goes to price increases as well.
You mentioned the Amazon example, and another app I see this on is, I shouldn't say app, Amazon is more than an app, but another app I see this on is DoorDash. If you've ever canceled DoorDash, I don't know if like Uber Eats does this as well, but DoorDash is going to come on and say, hey, before you cancel, you save this much in delivery fees. And this happened to me. We've talked about this in the podcast before. DoorDash is often bundled with other products. So in my case, I think it was Chase Bank. So I had DoorDash for 12 months. After that 12 months, of course, they're like, hey, we're going to start billing you for this. And I was like, I don't use it too much. I can go out and get my food. So I canceled it, but when I was canceling it, they did the, hey, you saved, $12.50 on delivery fees this month, or whatever that number is. And I think that's just a fantastic way to, again, go back and share the value that you're going to be missing out on. Build a little bit of that FOMO, and again, show people what they're losing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when it comes to price increases versus discounts, it's interesting because they've done studies that now show that if you increase your price about 6 to 10%, that's going to be noticed about at the same rate as a discount of 30%. So you have to, in other words, you have to discount a lot more to juice sales than the flip side of that of increasing a price and sales falling off. So if you only increase your price 6-10%, sales are going to stay pretty much relatively flat. Whereas in order to increase your sales, you've got to discount 30% in order to drive up volume. So this kind of ties back to that conversation we were having at the beginning of the episode, Zach, around a 1% change here drives a significant profit uplift. If you've got to discount your products 30% to get them to actually move, that's going to be a massively negative impact from a profit perspective unless you can drive an insane increase in volume. Whereas, okay, if I just take my prices up a couple of percentage points and my volume stays totally flat, I've just dropped all of that down to my bottom line, right? There's a significant opportunity to drive incremental profit.
And as we talk about price increases, this is going to be a topic for another episode, but I think we should talk about things like value escalation. And this is a conversation I have a lot with BSPs is, how do I increase my pricing without making people mad? You know, or how do I go about doing this? And it comes down to there's a key example of a major cell phone carrier. They increased prices, and the way they justified it was like, oh, you know, the costs to, you know, run the business are going up, but in exchange for this price increase, we're going to give you, you know, an extra 5-10 gigabytes of hotspot data. And I was like, great, because Verizon or, you know, any carrier knows that I probably don't use my hotspot data, so now they've just given me, you know, something I'm not going to use. So I think it goes back to the conversation of what value, if you do go down that, you know, increasing price, what value are you going to add to your products and services?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's got to be a give to get there. And you probably can't just unilaterally increase prices across the board without a good reason. And I don't think our costs are going up is a great reason. That's not one that people are going to be like, oh, okay, well, that's sure. Yeah, that's fine.
I don't think consumers are going to buy that. And
no.
The sad thing is, I think coming out of the pandemic, I think that excuse was used very commonly.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a huge proponent of, okay, if you're going to increase services or increase your cost, what's the value to the end user, the customer, the subscriber, whomever that may be.
Mm-hmm. But you bring up a perfect example, which is a situation where they did provide, you know, a carrier can provide an additional benefit to the customer, but the cost to them is effectively nothing because they know it's not necessarily going to increase their fixed or variable cost. So those types of situations are perfect ones where you can provide some additional value to the customer, but, you know, yes, there may be a small incremental cost, but again, going back to that example, if I increase my price by 1%, and even if I increase my variable cost by 1%, I'm still going to increase my profit significantly because increases in price, you know, a 1% increase in price drives a larger percentage increase in profit than any of your other changes could be: volume, fixed cost, or variable costs. So I think that's a really important point here to always kind of keep in mind is that price lever is your most impactful lever from a profitable perspective. I'm really going to need to do a spreadsheet on this, Zach. I know I threatened to do it at the beginning of this episode, and I feel like it's going to be necessary.
We have two action items. We need a spreadsheet and we need a chart. So we might have to dream up like a hypothetical scenario, and we can share that on the blog. Which, side note, if you haven't yet subscribed to, definitely go check that out. Gabe often posts a link to that on LinkedIn, but I think that's a great place where we can put those resources so people can visualize again what we're talking about in terms of the spreadsheet, the data visualization I mentioned. But these are great tools you can use today.
Yep, absolutely. This was such a fun conversation, Zach. I'm excited for episode 2 now.
This is way better than accounting class. You know?
I feel like that's a low bar, Zach, but I'll take it.
I was going to say, like, I don't know what your accounting looked like in college, but like what we would do, we'd do like a chapter a week. And then like on Fridays, we would do like what we called an in-class case. We'd get in the groups and, you know, you're presented a scenario and you have to like work it out. And I just remember like that Friday would basically just be the whole room being around like, what'd you get for this number? Like, are we balancing here? Everyone cross-checking their numbers because we all know like you're off $1 somewhere and you have to like go back up and find. Oh, accounting brings back good memories. I don't know if I'd say good memories, but the statement of cash flows, I'll never forget that. Day one of managerial accounting, which was like the accounting 2020. It's the second class. But they said like, oh, we changed the curriculum. So instead of like starting this, you know, out with a test or putting this on an exam, we're going to spend the first week of doing a statement of cash flows. And like, you know, like they basically pitched it as you can't ask for help, but it's not an exam, but like, we're not going to help you. And I'm like, well, this is a huge waste of my time, but that was painful.
Statement of cash flows is rough. Well, I will say, Zach, you were talking about, you know, the fun of accounting class. I did meet my wife in accounting class, in the very first accounting class that I ever took. So I do have fond memories of it from that perspective. Maybe not necessarily the debits and credits, but, you know, we did get together in accounting class.
I may have met my wife in accounting. We'll never know. Actually, now with my luck, it's going to be like some like, you know, insect bio or some class I had to take for my major.
That's
I hope it's not that one. Well, Gabe, this was a fantastic conversation. Don't forget to give us a like and follow on your favorite podcast app and subscribe to that YouTube channel as well. And keep an eye out for Gabe's LinkedIn post here. I'll share it as well. We will put some of these show notes in. Gabe's got an Excel spreadsheet he's cooking up. We'll have that data visualization visualization. That's tough to say when you're
It
rolling.
is. Yes.
We'll have that tool out as well. But don't forget to check in next week for a new episode. Actually, Gabe, we may be off next week. I think we're both out of the office, so we may have to come back after.
That's
the
true.
Independence
We're going to
Day
have to come
holiday.
back after the holiday. Yes.
Well, we will be ready to go with some new financial topics. And until then, we'll talk soon.